Seaman First Class Robert Chen of the USS West Virginia first spotted the incoming aircraft formation through his binoculars at 0755 hours on December 7, 1941, as 183 Japanese naval aircraft approached Oahu from the northwest in perfect attack formation. The sight of Nakajima B5N Kate torpedo bombers flying at masthead level across Pearl Harbor, followed by Aichi D3A Val dive bombers and Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters, would transform the United States from an isolationist nation into a global superpower committed to total victory in the Pacific War. Chen's battle station aboard the West Virginia placed him at the starboard 20mm gun mount where he had been conducting routine maintenance when the air raid sirens failed to sound and the first Japanese bombs began falling on Ford Island at exactly 0755 hours. The attack that would be remembered as a date which will live in infamy caught the Pacific Fleet completely unprepared, with most of the 70 warships moored at Pearl Harbor observing peacetime Sunday morning routine with minimal crews on duty and ammunition magazines locked according to peacetime security protocols. The Japanese strike force that Chen witnessed approaching Pearl Harbor represented the most meticulously planned surprise attack in modern naval history, launched from 6 aircraft carriers of Vice Admiral Chuchi Nagumo's 1st Air Fleet positioned 230 miles north of Oahu. The first wave consisted of 49 Nakajima B5N Kate high-level bombers carrying 16-inch armor-piercing shells converted to aerial bombs, 40 Nakajima B5N Kate torpedo bombers armed with specially modified torpedoes designed for shallow water operations, 51 Aichi D3A Val dive bombers equipped with 550-pound bombs, and 43 Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters providing escort and strafing support. The strategic objective of Operation AI, as the Pearl Harbor attack was designated by the Imperial Japanese Navy, was to destroy the United States Pacific Fleet's battle line and aircraft carriers in a single devastating blow that would prevent American naval interference with Japanese expansion throughout Southeast Asia and the Central Pacific. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto's plan required absolute surprise and perfect timing to succeed, as the Japanese strike force would be operating 4,000 miles from its nearest base while attacking the most heavily fortified American naval installation in the Pacific. Chen's first indication that this was not a training exercise came when he observed the red meatball insignia on the wings of the low-flying aircraft and heard the distinctive whistle of falling bombs followed by massive explosions that shook the West Virginia from stem to stern. The Japanese torpedo bombers of the Nakajima and Kaga air groups were attacking Battleship Row with Type 91 aerial torpedoes that had been modified with wooden fins to prevent them from diving too deep in Pearl Harbor's 40-foot deep water. The USS Oklahoma, moored outboard of the USS Maryland at berth F5, took the first torpedo hit at 0756 hours when a Nakajima B5N Kate from the carrier Nakajima launched its Type 91 torpedo at a range of 800 yards. The 450-pound warhead exploded against the Oklahoma's port side below the waterline, creating a massive hole that immediately began flooding the ship's forward compartments. Within 18 minutes, the Oklahoma would receive 4 more torpedo hits and begin capsizing to port, trapping over 400 sailors beneath the overturned hull. Chen watched in horror as the USS Arizona, anchored at berth F7 next to the repair ship USS Vestal, took a direct hit from an 1,800-pound armor-piercing bomb dropped by a Kate bomber from the carrier Kaga. The converted 16-inch naval shell penetrated the Arizona's forward magazines at 0806 hours, creating an explosion that lifted the entire forward section of the battleship out of the water and produced a fireball that rose 300 feet above Pearl Harbor. The Arizona's destruction killed 1,177 officers and enlisted men in less than 9 seconds, more than half of all American casualties during the entire Pearl Harbor attack. The West Virginia, Chen's own ship, became the primary target for Japanese torpedo bombers attacking from the southeast, as the massive battleship presented an unmistakable target moored outboard of the USS Tennessee at berth F6. The first torpedo struck the West Virginia's port side at frame 57 at 0756 hours, followed by 5 more torpedo hits within the next 10 minutes. Each Type 91 torpedo carried sufficient explosive power to blow a hole 30 feet in diameter through the battleship's anti-torpedo protection system, flooding entire compartments and causing the ship to settle by the bow. But Chen's most vivid memory of the Pearl Harbor attack was the sight of Japanese dive bombers attacking the airfields at Hickam Field, Wheeler Field, and Kaneohe Naval Air Station, where American aircraft were parked in neat rows according to peacetime security procedures designed to prevent sabotage. The Aichi D3A Val dive bombers from the carriers Shokaku and Zuikaku attacked in steep dives from 10,000 feet, releasing their 550-pound bombs at 2,500 feet before pulling out just above the ground. The concentrated attack destroyed 188 American aircraft on the ground while they were unable to defend themselves. The Japanese air attack doctrine that enabled the Pearl Harbor assault had been developed through extensive training in the inland sea of Japan, where pilots practiced torpedo attacks against targets anchored in shallow water similar to Pearl Harbor's conditions. The Nakajima B5N Kate bombers that Chen observed flying at wavetop level had been modified specifically for the Pearl Harbor mission, with reinforced landing gear to handle the increased weight of modified torpedoes and additional fuel tanks to extend their range for the 460-mile round trip from the Japanese carriers. The Zero fighters that provided escort for the Japanese bombers demonstrated the technological superiority that would dominate Pacific air combat for the first year of the war. The Mitsubishi A6M Zero, powered by a 940 horsepower Nakajima Sakae radial engine, could outclimb, outturn, and outrange any American fighter aircraft in service in December 1941. The Zero's two 20mm cannons and two 77mm machine guns provided devastating firepower for strafing attacks against American aircraft caught on the ground at Wheeler Field and Hickam Field. Chen's battle station at the 20mm gun mount placed him in position to observe the American response to the surprise attack as individual sailors and officers throughout Pearl Harbor began fighting back with whatever weapons they could bring to bear. The USS Nevada, the only battleship to get underway during the attack, began moving toward the harbor entrance at 0840 hours, while under concentrated attack from Japanese dive bombers determined to sink her in the narrow channel and block the harbor entrance completely. The anti-aircraft fire that Chen witnessed from his position aboard the West Virginia was initially ineffective because most ships were caught with their ammunition in locked magazines and their gun crews either on liberty or attending Sunday morning church services. The few guns that could be manned immediately were operated by skeleton crews who had to break into ammunition lockers and jury-rig electrical connections to get their weapons into action. The distinctive pom-pom-pom sound of American anti-aircraft guns gradually increased in intensity as more crews reached their battle stations. The second wave of Japanese aircraft, consisting of 167 planes launched from the same 6 carriers an hour after the first wave, arrived over Pearl Harbor at 0854 hours to find the American defenses fully alert and responding with concentrated anti-aircraft fire. The 81 Aichi D3A Val dive bombers of the second wave attacked targets that had been missed or only damaged during the first attack, while 54 Nakajima B5N Kate high-level bombers struck the Navy Yard and surrounding facilities. Chen's observation of the second wave attack revealed the tactical limitations that prevented the Japanese from achieving complete destruction of Pearl Harbor's facilities. The second wave bombers faced intense anti-aircraft fire from every ship in the harbor as American gun crews who had been caught off guard during the first attack were now fully prepared and supplied with ammunition. The USS Pennsylvania, in dry dock and undamaged during the first wave, directed devastating 40mm and 20mm fire against Japanese dive bombers attacking the Navy Yard. The weapons that proved most effective in defending Pearl Harbor during the second wave were the 5-inch dual-purpose guns mounted on cruisers and destroyers that could engage aircraft at longer ranges than the smaller anti-aircraft weapons. The USS San Francisco and USS New Orleans, moored at the Navy Yard, provided continuous fire that forced Japanese pilots to attack from higher altitudes and reduce the accuracy of their bomb drops. The destroyer USS Helm, underway in the harbor channel, maneuvered at high speed while engaging Japanese aircraft with all weapons. But Chen's most profound observation during the Pearl Harbor attack was the transformation of American military personnel from peacetime routine to wartime determination within minutes of the first Japanese bombs falling. Sailors who had been awakened from Sunday morning sleep fought fires, rescued shipmates from flooded compartments, and manned anti-aircraft guns while their ships were sinking beneath them. The USS West Virginia's damage control parties continued fighting flooding and fires even as the ship settled deeper into the harbor mud. The strategic failure of the Japanese Pearl Harbor attack became apparent to Chen only in retrospect, as the immediate shock of the assault obscured the tactical limitations that would prove decisive in the long term. The Japanese strike force failed to locate and attack the Pacific Fleet's 3 aircraft carriers, USS Enterprise, USS Lexington, and USS Saratoga, which were at sea conducting training exercises and would form the nucleus of American naval recovery in the Pacific. More critically, The Japanese failed to destroy Pearl Harbor's fuel storage tanks, dry docks, and submarine base, facilities that would prove essential to American offensive operations throughout the Pacific War. The tactical innovations that the Japanese demonstrated at Pearl Harbor would be copied and improved by American forces throughout the Pacific Campaign. The coordination of torpedo bombers, dive bombers, and fighters in a single integrated attack became the standard doctrine for American carrier operations from Doolittle Raid through the final strikes against Japan. The shallow water torpedo modifications that enabled attacks in Pearl Harbor's 40-foot depth would be adapted for American operations in restricted waters throughout the Pacific. Chen's detailed observation of Japanese attack techniques provided valuable intelligence for American analysts studying enemy capabilities and tactics. The Japanese emphasis on surprise, concentration of force, and precise timing would be incorporated into American planning for offensive operations against Japanese-held islands. The courage and skill displayed by Japanese pilots during the Pearl Harbor attack convinced American commanders that victory in the Pacific would require superior training, equipment, and tactical innovation rather than simple numerical superiority. The damage assessment that emerged from the Pearl Harbor attack revealed both the effectiveness of Japanese planning and the resilience of American naval architecture. 4 battleships were sunk or capsized, 4 were heavily damaged, 3 cruisers and 3 destroyers were damaged, and 188 aircraft were destroyed. Total American casualties included 2,403 killed and 1,178 wounded, with the majority of deaths occurring aboard the USS Arizona. But 6 of the 8 damaged battleships would be repaired and returned to service, providing the heavy gunfire support that proved crucial during amphibious operations throughout the Pacific. The strategic consequences of Pearl Harbor extended far beyond the immediate damage to the Pacific Fleet as the surprise attack unified American public opinion behind a war effort that would transform the United States into the world's dominant military and industrial power. The isolationist sentiment that had characterized American foreign policy during the 1930s evaporated overnight as Congress declared war on Japan with only 1 dissenting vote. The attack that Admiral Yamamoto had hoped would discourage American involvement in the Pacific instead guaranteed total American commitment to victory regardless of cost. Chen's survival of the Pearl Harbor attack and his detailed recollection of Japanese tactics contributed to American understanding of enemy capabilities and the development of countermeasures that would prove effective throughout the Pacific War. His observation that Japanese pilots displayed exceptional skill and courage while following meticulously planned attack procedures influenced American training programs that emphasized similar levels of preparation and coordination. The technological lessons learned from Pearl Harbor accelerated American development of radar, anti-aircraft weapons, and damage control procedures that would give American forces significant advantages in subsequent engagements. The ineffectiveness of American anti-aircraft fire during the first wave led to intensive development of proximity-fused shells, improved fire control systems, and concentrated gun layouts that would make American ships the most heavily defended vessels in any navy by 1943. The intelligence failures that enabled the Japanese surprise attack led to complete reorganization of American communications intelligence and the development of code-breaking capabilities that would provide decisive advantages during the battles of Coral Sea and Midway. The shock of being caught completely unprepared despite numerous warning indicators convinced American commanders that intelligence gathering and analysis were as important as weapons and training in modern warfare. Chen's observation of the human dimension of the Pearl Harbor attack, the courage of sailors fighting to save their ships while under bombardment, the determination of damage control parties working in flooded compartments, the dedication of medical personnel treating casualties under fire, demonstrated the moral foundation that would sustain American forces through 4 years of Pacific combat. The spirit of cooperation and mutual support that emerged during the Pearl Harbor attack became the standard for American military culture throughout the war. The tactical analysis of the Pearl Harbor attack revealed both Japanese strengths and weaknesses that would influence the entire Pacific campaign. Japanese aircraft proved superior to American fighters in 1941, but the limited ammunition and fuel capacity of carrier-based aircraft restricted the duration and intensity of attacks. Japanese pilots displayed exceptional skill and training, but the complexity of coordinated carrier operations required perfect weather and communication conditions that would not always be available in future engagements. The logistics lessons learned from Pearl Harbor influenced American naval construction and deployment throughout the Pacific War. The vulnerability of battleships to air attack led to emphasis on aircraft carriers as the primary striking force, while the effectiveness of Japanese torpedo bombers convinced American designers to improve underwater protection systems on new ship designs. The destruction of aircraft caught on the ground led to development of dispersed airfield layouts and hardened aircraft shelters. Chen's documentation of Japanese attack procedures provided the foundation for American tactical development throughout the Pacific Campaign. The Japanese emphasis on achieving surprise through radio silence and indirect approach routes was incorporated into American planning for offensive operations. The coordination of different aircraft types in integrated strikes became standard procedure for American carrier task forces attacking Japanese-held islands. The psychological impact of the Pearl Harbor attack on American military personnel was profound and lasting, as the shock of surprise attack was transformed into determination to achieve complete victory over Japan. The sailors and airmen who survived Pearl Harbor carried with them the knowledge that modern warfare could produce catastrophic results within minutes, but also that American forces could recover from devastating attacks and emerge stronger than before. The industrial mobilization that followed Pearl Harbor demonstrated American productive capacity that would prove decisive in the Pacific War. The shipyards that repaired Pearl Harbor damage would go on to produce more naval vessels than all other nations combined, while aircraft factories that replaced destroyed planes would manufacture over 100,000 military aircraft by war's end. The attack that was intended to discourage American resistance instead triggered the largest military-industrial expansion in human history. Chen's analysis of Japanese tactical doctrine observed during the Pearl Harbor attack influenced American development of carrier aviation throughout the Pacific War. The Japanese practice of launching coordinated strikes with multiple aircraft types provided the template for American task force operations from Guadalcanal through the final strikes against Japan. The precision and timing displayed by Japanese pilots became the standard that American aircrews sought to match and exceed. The strategic deception that enabled the Japanese surprise attack at Pearl Harbor led to American development of sophisticated intelligence operations throughout the Pacific. The success of Japanese radio silence and false communications convinced American commanders of the importance of communication security and deception operations. The code-breaking efforts that were intensified after Pearl Harbor would provide crucial intelligence advantages during subsequent Pacific campaigns. The damage control innovations that emerged from Pearl Harbor experiences saved thousands of American lives during subsequent engagements. The techniques developed for fighting fires aboard the USS West Virginia and USS California were applied throughout the Pacific Fleet, while the lessons learned about compartmentalization and flooding control influenced ship design and crew training. The medical procedures developed for treating burn casualties and shock victims became standard throughout American naval forces. Chen's observation of Japanese aircraft performance during the Pearl Harbor attack provided valuable intelligence about enemy capabilities that influenced American fighter development throughout the war. The superior maneuverability and range of the Mitsubishi A6M Zero convinced American designers that new fighters would require improved performance rather than simply heavier armament. The development of the F-6F Hellcat and F-4U Corsair was directly influenced by analysis of Japanese aircraft observed over Pearl Harbor. The logistics analysis that followed the Pearl Harbor attack revealed the complexity of Japanese operational planning and the risks inherent in long-range carrier operations. The Japanese achievement of complete surprise while operating 4,000 miles from their nearest base demonstrated the potential of carrier aviation, but also revealed the vulnerability of carrier forces to detection and counterattack. American carrier operations throughout the Pacific War would benefit from analysis of both Japanese successes and limitations demonstrated at Pearl Harbor. The political consequences of Pearl Harbor extended throughout American society as the attack united the nation behind a war effort that would transform American foreign policy for the remainder of the 20th century. The isolationist movement that had opposed American involvement in foreign wars was discredited overnight, while public opinion shifted to support unlimited military action against Japan and its allies. The attack that Admiral Yamamoto feared might awaken a sleeping giant accomplished exactly that result. Chen's detailed recollection of the Pearl Harbor attack contributed to historical analysis that would influence military planning for decades after the war ended. His observations of Japanese tactics, American responses, and the effectiveness of different weapons provided valuable data for military historians and strategists studying the evolution of naval warfare. The lessons learned from Pearl Harbor continued to influence American military doctrine throughout the Cold War and beyond. The technological innovations that emerged from Pearl Harbor analysis accelerated American development of radar, communications, and weapons systems that would prove decisive throughout the Pacific War. The failure of American radar operators to correctly interpret contacts showing the incoming Japanese strike force led to improved training and procedures that would prevent similar surprises in future engagements. The ineffectiveness of American fighter interception led to development of improved aircraft and tactics. The cultural impact of Pearl Harbor on American society was profound and lasting, as the attack became a symbol of both vulnerability and resilience that would influence American national identity for generations. The phrase "Remember Pearl Harbor" became a rallying cry that sustained public support for the war effort through 4 years of costly Pacific campaigns. The memory of American sailors fighting to save their ships while under attack became an enduring example of courage and dedication under fire. Chen's survival of the Pearl Harbor attack and his subsequent service throughout the Pacific War demonstrated the transformation of American military personnel from peacetime routine to wartime effectiveness. The lessons learned during the surprise attack, the importance of constant vigilance, rapid response to changing situations, and coordinated action under pressure, became fundamental elements of American military culture throughout the war. The strategic analysis of Pearl Harbor revealed the decisive importance of aircraft carriers in modern naval warfare and led to complete reorganization of American fleet structure and tactics. The vulnerability of battleships to air attack convinced American planners that carriers would be the primary striking force in future engagements, while the effectiveness of coordinated airstrikes led to development of task force tactics that would dominate Pacific naval operations. The intelligence lessons learned from Pearl Harbor led to creation of comprehensive intelligence organizations that would provide crucial advantages throughout the Pacific War. The failure to detect Japanese intentions despite numerous warning indicators convinced American leaders that intelligence gathering and analysis required dedicated resources and systematic procedures. The code-breaking successes that followed Pearl Harbor would provide decisive advantages during the battles of Coral Sea, Midway, and the Philippine Sea. Chen's observation of the human dimension of warfare during the Pearl Harbor attack, the courage of individuals facing overwhelming odds, the importance of teamwork under pressure, the resilience of American forces when confronted with disaster, provided insights that would influence military leadership and training throughout the war. The spirit of determination and mutual support that emerged during the attack became the foundation of American military effectiveness in the Pacific. The logistics lessons learned from repairing Pearl Harbor damage influenced American naval construction and maintenance throughout the Pacific War. The techniques developed for salvaging damaged battleships, repairing aircraft, and restoring facilities under wartime conditions provided the foundation for mobile repair capabilities that would sustain American forces throughout their advance across the Pacific. The shipyard workers and naval personnel who restored Pearl Harbor to operational status became the model for similar efforts throughout the theater. The tactical innovations that emerged from analysis of the Pearl Harbor attack influenced American carrier operations throughout the Pacific War. The Japanese demonstration of coordinated multi-carrier strikes became the template for American task force operations, while the effectiveness of low-level torpedo attacks led to development of similar tactics for American torpedo bombers. The precision and timing displayed by Japanese pilots became the standard that American aircrews sought to achieve in their own operations. When I saw 183 Japanese aircraft appear over Pearl Harbor at 0755 hours on December 7, 1941, I witnessed the moment that transformed the United States from an isolationist nation into a global superpower committed to total victory in the Pacific War. The sight of those Nakajima B5N Kate torpedo bombers flying at masthead level across the harbor, followed by Aichi D3A Val dive bombers and Mitsubishi A6M Zero fighters, marked the end of American innocence and the beginning of the most destructive conflict in human history. The attack that was intended to discourage American involvement in the Pacific instead guaranteed that the United States would commit unlimited resources to achieving complete victory over Japan. The surprise that Admiral Yamamoto achieved at Pearl Harbor came at the cost of awakening American industrial and military potential that would prove decisive in determining the outcome of the Pacific War. The 183 aircraft that appeared over Pearl Harbor on that Sunday morning in December marked the beginning of the end for the Japanese Empire. The courage displayed by American sailors fighting to save their ships while under attack demonstrated the resilience and determination that would characterize American military performance throughout the Pacific War. The lessons learned during those traumatic hours at Pearl Harbor, the importance of constant vigilance, rapid response to changing conditions, and coordinated action under pressure, became fundamental elements of American military doctrine that would contribute to ultimate victory in the Pacific. The sight of the USS Arizona exploding in a pillar of flame 300 feet high became a symbol of both American vulnerability and American resolve that would sustain the war effort through 4 years of costly Pacific campaigns. The memory of Pearl Harbor would inspire American forces throughout their advance across the Pacific, from Guadalcanal to Okinawa, reminding them that the price of victory had been paid in advance by the sailors who died in Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941. When I saw 183 Japanese aircraft appear over Pearl Harbor, I knew that the world had changed forever and that the United States would never again be caught unprepared for war. The attack that began at 0755 hours on a peaceful Sunday morning ended American isolation and began the transformation that would make the United States the dominant global power for the remainder of the 20th century and beyond.